A massive grid of cars is set to do battle in qualifying at Monza. It is the opening round of the Fanatec GT World Challenge Europe, powered by AWS Endurance Cup. 43 GT3 cars we have across the overall contest, the Silver Cup and Pro-Am, and it promises to be, as ever at Monza, an enthralling race, because with so many cars, so many good teams, so many star drivers, there's going to be plenty of action. And of course, you never know what incidents there might be, and you never know until we get to the end of the next hour and a bit as to what the grid is going to look like and who is going to start where. It is a chilly morning and the team's all wrapped up pretty warm, ready to get out onto the circuit. Yesterday morning was a bit sunnier when the cars hit the track for the free practice session. Well, of course, they're going to qualify in one set of conditions, if you like, a chilly morning, but they're going to be racing from 3 o'clock this afternoon, when hopefully it will be a little bit warmer. So this isn't going to give them much in the way of data. It might give them a little bit of a better chance, though, of setting a quick time in the cool conditions. David Addison and John Watson with you. Looking forward to this 3-part qualifying session at, John, a fabulous motor racing circuit.
Love this place to bits. Have done ever since I first came here, 1971, when there wasn't a single chicane in sight. It was the original Monza, you might call it the road track, as opposed to the bank track, which of course was incorporated in so many races here at Monza, be it sports cars, be it the Indianapolis, the crossover at Indianapolis 1957, or Formula One itself. A lot of chicanes introduced over the years, 3 at the end of the pit straight, second one coming before the Lesmo, final one the Ascari, fantastic chicane, a proper chicane. I just love coming to Monza, love the racetrack, love the whole feel of Italy, the food. I was going to say the traffic, but that's a nightmare. Otherwise, it doesn't get a lot better for me than a race at Monza.
Now this is going to be some race, as I say, 43 cars, all but 2 have 3 driver lineups. So there are just a very, very small number in Pro-Am, effectively, or the Silver Cup, that's split it across 2 drivers. There's a great variety because we've got 9 different brands. There's only one Bentley, but it's proved to be a very quick car over the weekend thus far. Nelson Panciatici has been the real star turn in that, and he will drive 107, I think, in that last part of qualifying. Of course, you can't refuel, therefore the cars are getting lighter through Q1 into Q3 at the very end. Makes sense to have your fastest driver in for that final session, but in some cases it's rather hard, John, to determine which the quickest driver is going to be because they're so evenly matched.
Well, certainly across all the pro entries, I mean just a stellar entry. There are a few surprises. People, for example, yesterday afternoon, that pre-qualifying session, some driver-car combinations. What are they doing down there? For example, Alessandro Pierguidi in the Iron Lynx Ferrari, 28th quickest. Matt Campbell, Earl Bamber, Mathieu Jaminet in the GPX Martini Racing Porsche, 27th quickest. Are those guys, were they just out for a dawdle around Monza, or what were they doing? Obviously, they will go a lot quicker in these 3 qualifying sessions we're about to see.
Now, one thing that we were all rather caught on the hop with yesterday was that as pre-qualifying 90-minute session had its mid-part, it all went moderately quiet. You could tell that people were scrubbing in tyres or doing a simulated stint race run or whatever it might have been as they worked through a programme. They weren't chasing a time. We had this feeling that they would chase a time in the last 20 minutes or so. That's when they put their star driver in. That's when they might go for a dummy qualifying run in anticipation of this morning. However, 15 minutes from the end, bang, red flag, Porsche off the road, the 222 Team Allied racing car, Jan Kaspelik, GT4 gentleman racer, graduating to GT3, had a big off, did a lot of damage, and that brought out the red flag, and the session was not resumed. So if anybody was on the front foot, as it were, ready to go, John, ready to do that qualifying run, well, that plan was scotched, and therefore they come into this session now with a little bit of work to do, maybe.
Very much the case, certainly those teams that might have considered a pre-qualifying simulation run, losing that final 20 minutes or so of the session, that's something you can't anticipate. You could maybe make a model of what could happen in any session, but particularly towards the end of a session, when you're about to go out, do the hard yards, in other words, find out just how fast your car is, albeit in different temperatures, different climactic areas. So frustration undoubtedly in the pit lane, but it was the same for everybody, so nobody's lost more than anyone else.
That's the Pro-Am Garage 59 Aston Martin. Alexander West will go first, Chris Goodwin, and then Johnny Adam you can anticipate to go at the end of the session in Q3. 188, last year's Pro-Am champions. Number 63, now this is a strong car, we say in every race, don't we? Mirko Bortolotti is back with the band. Marco Mappelli and Andrea Caldarelli after his year sabbatical, if you like, with Audi. He's back as a Lamborghini driver, Mirko Bortolotti. I mean, that doesn't want for anything in terms of a driver lineup, John, does it?
I mean, looking around the field, that is only one of maybe a dozen cars that have got what I loosely describe as a stellar driver lineup. Mirko Bortolotti, as you mentioned, having had a year in Audi, back with the Lamborghini family, but a slightly different family to the one that he was familiar with, and hopefully will just slot in there as if what happened in 2020, well, I was really still part of the Audi, VW, Lamborghini and the rest family.
Yes, now he's got the right badge on his overalls, you can argue. He's back in his spiritual home. There's another of the FFF racing team Lamborghinis, Hiroshi Hamaguchi, Phil Keane. They have been, of course, Pro-Am champions 2 years ago in sprint and endurance. Phil Keane still knocking on the door of that maiden British GT title. He comes so close every year. Now, this has been not only an interesting car, but an interesting team. Let's do the car and the drivers first of all. Callum Ilott, along with Davide Rigon and Antonio Fuoco. So you've got two single-seater hot shoes joining somebody that has done single-seater racing, but he's now very much a Ferrari GT veteran, Davide Rigon. And it's proved to be a quick car thus far this weekend. Iron Lynx, this new Ferrari team, one of the two people behind it, Andrea Piccini, who of course we've seen have great success in GT cars, and that is the 71 Ferrari footwell with Antonio Fuoco good to go. We're going to get some great shots from the footwell as you watch his feet dancing across the pedals. And Fuoco and Callum Ilott and Davide Rigon have all proved to be quick over the weekend. For Antonio and for Callum, it's a bit of a career diversion into a GT Ferrari, but they've adapted very well, Watty, so far this weekend, haven't they?
Yes, I mean, it is a significant change. I mean, first of all, you've got a cavernous cabin in which you're sitting. Single-seater is very tight, very, you know, you're squeezed in that single-seater cockpit. What I would like to see in the 71 Ferrari is, depending which of those three drivers is behind the wheel, is coming into the braking zones, particularly into first chicane, second chicane, third chicane, where you've got a big break into those corners. Are they going to be traditional right foot breakers, which I suspect maybe Davide Rigon might be, but Callum Ilott and Fuoco, I suspect, are left foot breakers, having come from a karting background and also then junior single seaters. The clutch pedal is redundant. They use their left foot, left leg as the braking leg rather than changing from the right leg from throttle to the brake. So hopefully we'll get a few views, particularly coming into a braking zone. It's something that, you know, an old school driver might find difficult, the adaptation from having been accustomed to brake with your right foot to go to your left foot. Subconsciously, you can make mistakes. So if you're a right foot braker, just stay with right foot braking. And if you're a left foot braker, just stick with what you're good at.
Now, to get John further excited, let's have a look at Porsche. Dynamic Motorsport winners here 2 years ago. They bring Matteo Cairoli, Klaus Bachler, Christian Engelhardt in 54. Again, that goes on our long short list of possible winners, doesn't it?
It does. I mean, what can you say? It's a stellar car, a stellar lineup. But where are they in that? Just the pace of some of the cars we didn't see develop in that pre-qualifying session. Then the truncated end when at 20 minutes or so that session then was red flagged off. So we don't know the true pace. As I said in commentary yesterday, there are 20 cars who are all capable of getting into the top 10 very easily, and I don't know which of those 20 cars it will be. Very much a question of finding the clear lap, and also those teams that have saved as many fresh or new sets of rubber as possible, and they will want to hold back at least one set of new tyres, if not more, for when the race, the three drivers over the 3 hours take behind the wheel. So it's a judgment that teams have to make. Do they use those tyres to get grid position, track position, which is probably what I would do, and then worry about the race, because so many other factors will come into play.
There is the evocative Mad Panda livery for the Mad Panda Motorsport car is Ezequiel Perez Companc, and for him, a new co-driver, Rick Brokers, is joining him for this year. Right, Q1 is underway then, so 15 minutes, then there's the break between Q1, Q2, same again, then into Q3. So this three-part session. Clemens Schmidt goes out first for Lamborghini, one of the Grasser racing team cars. You almost forget about Grasser now because Emil Frey has come on so strong, and so has the FFF team, but it was Grasser that was the real flag bearer for many, many seasons. 57 is the Mercedes run by the Winwood racing team of Russell Ward, Philip Ellis and Miguel Grenier, and it's going to be Russell Ward, the American driver, that goes first in this qualifying session. So new boots put on. Interesting that a team is doing that even though the green flag has been waved, and you know you've lost a minute and only now the tyres go on. You'd have thought maybe they'd be popped to trot right from the get-go.
I suppose part of the thinking is that brand new set of tyres, you go and do your out lap. Your first flying lap ought to be the best. Maybe in these slightly crude conditions you might get 2 flying laps out, but to go out at the very, very beginning when the track goes green, now we're seeing the thundering herd make its way onto the racetrack. Others, 88, that's the Raffaele Marciello Mercedes, sitting back. I don't know who's behind the wheel, whether it'll be Jules Gugno or Danny Juncadella in this phase. But there's no rush. They know that they need only 1, maybe at best 2 flying laps to secure a time to give that car the maximum performance.
There is the 33 Ferrari, Benji Heintes and Patrick Kujala. Benji has good pace around here from Ferrari Challenge experience. Very, very good yesterday in the Fanatec GT Esports Pro Series race. Started at the back of the grid, but raced really well to get himself up the order. Now, the lap they're on you can kind of ignore because it's the out lap. The first one will be a start-up lap, so it's going to be a good few minutes really before we start to have proper times. And again, we'll be looking at it in terms of the individual session, but what the times do when you get to Q2 and to Q3 to aggregate, because that's what you do with the 2, then 3 drivers to determine the grid. So we'll be talking about the session and overall, so it gets a little bit confusing, but it does pay out in the end, as there towards the timing line comes the Aston Martin. Plenty of horsepower, of course, for a fast circuit like this. Alexander West at the wheel, John.
Yes, the Aston Martin and the Mercedes-AMG GT3 share the same power unit. It's a commercial agreement between the 2 companies. In fact, Mercedes-AMG has taken a shareholding in Aston Martin as they restructure and move forward in terms of technology that's available, in this case across the counter from Mercedes-Benz.
Well, Alexander West, part of the investment of Garage 59, is the man behind the wheel. Now we've got our first investigation of the morning. The Jota McLaren, Ollie Wilkinson, Ben Barnicoat and Rob Bell's car, with Ben Barnicoat at the wheel, is being looked at for its release. So that presumably is from its garage, or its pit box, if you like, from the apron onto the fast lane. Might have impeded another car. So that's being looked at by the stewards. And you're looking at Alexander West in the Aston Martin as the circuit gets busier and busier all the time. Traffic management is going to be absolutely key to this, isn't it?
Yes, and that's maybe why some teams have decided just to wait. If they wait for the final 10 minutes rather than the maximum time available, they feel that all we need is a clear track. And because the bulk of the field will go out at the earliest opportunity, they will also finish up back in the pit lane before the end of the session, so they might see some drivers waiting. Look, there you've got a traffic jam coming out of a Scarry chicane. Some cars weaving around, trying to get temperature into the tyres. Others will be coming around, coming up. I mean, Alexander West and the Aston Martin will be looking to complete a flying lap. He's now found himself in amongst a group of cars, so all the work he did on that out lap, personal best and also fastest overall, he's had to back out of it. So sometimes the wisdom of going out at the earliest opportunity can be offset with the frustration of finding yourself in a melee of cars that are coming out to begin their out lap, let alone go on to a flying lap.
Very true. Karim Ogier has set the target time. With all due deference, I think it will be bettered as people go faster. Now there is Matt Campbell in a big, big hurry. Last year, GPX ran in that sort of heritage Targa Florio Gulf colour scheme. This year, GPX running in the Martini colours, the white rather than the silver of Martini. There is in the GT2 race the black with the Martini stripes colour scheme adorning a Porsche. And Matt Campbell is a man on an absolute mission then as he weaves in and out the traffic down to the Parabolica. The time to beat is a 48.6 just set by Marcus Finkelhock, but this is looking good for Matt Campbell. It might not be the ultimate pole position time, but it's going to put him up at the top for now, surely. Heads out of the Parabolica, up towards the timing line, breaks the beam and goes fastest. 1:48.065 then, so a really good effort that by Matt Campbell.
Yes, he got a clear lap, and he also used the Ferrari directly ahead of him to get the slipstream coming into Parabolica, and more importantly, he got the ability to dive down the inside. As we go now, Dries van Thor, who looks like he's going very quickly indeed, 1:47.9, provisionally quickest on board with a Ferrari. Where is that camera on board? What are his feet doing? On the brakes now, into the first chicane. No, it's not.
It's Parabolica, isn't it? Coming up to
the Parabolica.
End of the lap.
Into the Parabolica, yeah.
So personal bests. Where's this going to put Antonio Fuoco? Breaks the beam, 5th quickest. So you've got Audi, Mercedes, BMW, Porsche, Ferrari. Great mix of brands up at the top. Dries van Thor is the fastest now, by the way, 1:47.916. Interesting that Dries is put in for Q1 rather than Q3. Interesting to see how the strategies play out across the teams. WRT, by the way, and 32 Dries van Thor we've just talked about is for WRT. They're busy here, but also at Barcelona in ELMS, so that's where you'll find Thierry Tassin and Vincent Voss. So this element of WRT all being orchestrated this weekend by Pierre Giordano.
The growth of WRT into a variety of different disciplines. Here, Dries van Thor again, sector 1 has gone purple, so on his second flying lap on that new set of rubber, and he's gone fastest overall sector 2, and that's actually Giacomo Altoe in the Almeida Fry has actually surpassed Dries van Thor to go quickest by just 44 hundredths of a second.
That's a good effort, isn't it, that? So Altoe to the top. Now there, number 35 BMW is Timo Glock, so from Formula 1 to the DTM, sports car racing, GT racing now, sharing with Martin Tomczyk, he's a good mate. And the BMW, I'm fascinated to see how these two cars of Valkenhorst pan out at the end of 3 hours. I'm not necessarily sure we'll be talking about them at the start of the race, fighting for the race win, but I just have a feeling that they might be sleepers and come good at the very end.
It's a good lineup on the BMW, and again, as you mentioned, simply about who is there in that last minute of the race. As we go on board again with the Ferrari, makes its way out of Parabolica, fastest overall second sector, so this ought to be an improvement from the present 6th. It goes even better to quickest overall.
So Antonio Fuoco the fastest by a 1/5 of a second from Dries van Thor. Sheldon van der Linde's BMW is up to 3rd, Raffaele Marciello is 4th, Ben Barnicoat in the Jota McLaren is 5th, 6th is Giacomo Altoe, and that kicking up the dirt, Matt Campbell. Well, he was the fastest a little while ago. He's currently 7th, as you see, and has just gone a personal best by 6 thousandths within the first sector. So Matt Campbell is hustling on.
Yeah, he's going to be concerned about I think it's the Barwell Lamborghini directly ahead of him in a different class to that of the Porsche, so he's unlikely to be able to catch and overtake the Lamborghini going into Parabolica. Will pick up some of the slipstream, but the distance between the two cars is too great. And really, he's barely made any ground on the Lamborghini on that straight down into Parabolica.
Yeah, that's true. Mirko Bortolotti has gone 2nd, by the way, in the Orange 1 FFF Racing Team Lamborghini. So it's Fuoco, Bortolotti, Van Thor, Sheldon van der Linde. Brother Kelvin drives with Van Thor, incidentally. Cairoli 5th for Porsche, Raffaele Marciello 6th. Over the line goes Matt Campbell. Not a stellar lap. And we've got 42 cars out on track. Adrian Tombe being the one that's got to set a time, and the point of all of that is that we don't have 43, and the 43rd, if you like, the one that's missing, is 222 Porsche, so I think the damage of yesterday has proved to be too great.
Yeah, it's a great shame. I mean, the car nosed into the barriers on the exit of Lesmo 2. It's a relatively quick exit, and of course, if you lose the car on the exit, it turns sharp right, and the run to the barriers very short. So Fuoco improving further again. 1:47.111. In fact,
just lost out in the last sector, didn't he? Two purples.
Fractionally done. Yeah.
Yeah, shame that. Good effort, but as you say, just ebbing away towards the end. Now have a look at Dries Van Thor, assuming the traffic's not in his way, because he's done an absolute best in the first. And this, John, Mirko Bortolotti, bit down in sector 1, but look, purple, sector 2, and he's really fighting the Lamborghini.
Yeah, and significantly up in sector 2, working hard on the wheel. This could see Mirko Bortolotti take provisional pole in Q1, comes across the line, waiting for the... Yes, he does.
1:46.949, quicker by 10, so Lamborghini goes ahead of Ferrari. Mirko Bortolotti ahead of Antonio Fuoco. Raffaele Marciello is up to third. It's got a rather Italian feel to the front of the grid. There he is. Lello, Raffaele Marciello, third quickest then, and he's down in the middle sector by about 3/10 on this lap. So it might not necessarily be another improvement. And Dries Van Thor, absolute best sector 1, bit down in sector 2 though, lost a little of ground in the second sector, most of which I suspect is down to traffic right now.
I think at the minute it's very difficult to find a clear corner, let alone a clear lap. So what can Marciello do? He had a personal best sector 1, significantly down in sector 2, and that's no doubt because he was closing up on the Audi directly ahead of him, so I doubt any improvement. Dries Van Thor goes third, but Marciello stays in fourth position.
So what have we got? Just under 4 minutes of Q1 to go. Sheldon van der Linde's BMW, fourth fastest, into the pit lane, so I suspect that's the end of that. Ben Barnicoat, though, in the McLaren here, and it's a very different colour scheme. Comes up towards the timing line. Bortolotti the quickest. Ben Barnicoat is 8th. He's done 2 personals, so an improvement should be coming here from Ben Barnicoat. Very, very quick British driver. He will break the timing beam to go 6th fastest, 1:47.692. It's good to have McLaren's back. I know we've only got a couple of them, one for the Inception Racing team, this being the Jota car, but it's good that McLaren, former champion brand, of course, is back on this grid.
It is, and delighted to see Jota running that car, and 2 very strong drivers behind the wheel, and Ollie Wilkinson joining in, and no doubt will be learning heaps from his 2 teammates.
Now what about Giacomo Altway? He's always been a bit of a star, came through the ranks of the Lamborghini Super Trofeo, won the European Championship, won the World Final, won the International GT Open Championship, and quietly getting on with learning about GT racing. Now with the Emil Frey Racing Squad, he's 11th, and Altway again with one of the top teams. Another dark horse for a good result this weekend, and another car worth watching is the reigning champion, number 51, the Ferrari of Alessandro Pierguidi. So he at the moment has got work to do. He's only 15th, whereas the sister Iron Lynx car is 2nd. So we know the Ferraris can deliver. Alessandro just needs to dig deep.
And of the second of those 2 cars currently in second place, purple for sector 1 for Fuoco. Nothing remarkable, still a strong sector time in sector 2, so a lot to do. Can the Iron Lynx Ferrari depose the Orange 1 FFF's Racing Team Lamborghini before the flag comes out? 2 minutes to go.
So we've got that question, and then you've also, of course, got the overall question of what is going to happen across Q2 and Q3 as you start to aggregate the times. Right, Pierguidi hanging it out at the Parabolica, running it up over the curb. Green, green, so 2 personal bests. Good effort this. He's got to improve from 16th, and he does, up to 6th fastest, which instantly becomes 7th because Raffaele Marciello went slightly faster, and so also did Ben Barnicoat. So a bit more shuffling in the order. And Alex Fontana is another one that's gone quicker. See, he's up to 5th now, Fontana in the number 14 Lamborghini, which comes out of the Emil Frey Racing stable. So it changes and it changes and it changes again. Of course, inevitably, John, you do your best. What you can't legislate for is what other people are doing, and that lap time of another driver could certainly have an effect on your lap.
Well, you've got 42 cars on racetrack, and you think you've just achieved a super time. Look, Raffaele Marciello, fastest overall sector 1, coming up to the conclusion of sector 2, 1.4 seconds away. Where did that time go? Was that traffic? Was that a driving error? I mean, it's not simply just Raffaele Marciello has lost pace. There's somewhere he loses 1.5 seconds in that middle sector, and all the hard yards he did in sector 1 is for nothing.
Yeah, I just wonder, with only half a minute to go, whether it's going to end up being a lap that he aborts and comes in, or whether he just wanted, well, you could argue either way, it could have been a lap that he had to abort, or he wanted to try something in Sector 1, and that was the purpose of that lap. We might not find out, but either way, you're right, a big chunk of time lost in the middle sector. But I think Raffaele has bailed, and yes, he's come into the pit lane. So whether it was always going to be an in-lap and he was having one last hurrah, or whether it's become an in-lap because of a drama, we might find out post-session. That's Ben Barnicoat then. He's been up and down the order, 7th. I mean, he's still at the pointy end, which is all good. Ollie Wilkinson and Rob Bell sharing the driving duties here. So Ben, who came from single-seater racing, Formula Renault NEC champion through Formula 3, part of the Racing Steps Foundation initially, then into GT cars, ends that session 7th. Went quicker actually at 47.609 on the last lap, but staying in 7th. This is Ryuichi Tomita, who was 4th yesterday in the Fanatec eSports race that we had at Monza, and he was the class winner as well in that race. But Tomita, I think, is backing out of that. Well, that's blown the cobwebs away, John, hasn't it? That was a pretty intense session, but Mirko Bortolotti back in a Lamborghini, and he means business. He's the fastest.
Yes, I think just watching this last couple of minutes, there was a theme developing, which was the middle sector of the racetrack. Everybody more or less was losing just under half a second or over half a second. And to me, that tells me that everybody went out on a fresh set of rubber towards the end of their lap, towards the end of the session. It's that middle sector where the grip is at a premium, because you've got the second of the chicane, you've got the 2 Lesmos, and you've got the approach and entry into Ascari. And that part of the racetrack, for everybody, was becoming the bogey part of the racetrack. That's where the time was being lost, and simply because the freshness of that new set of Pirelli rubber, that's where the effect of the tyre beginning to stabilise was being seen most clearly.
So now we have the switch of driver ready for Q2, and so now, as I mentioned earlier, we'll be talking about what the lap time does in that session, and also what it does for the aggregated grid. So we are about 6 minutes away from the session getting underway with the next driver. Of course, some still on their in-lap, so it's all eating into the time available. This is the Sky Tempesta Ferrari that you're looking at, Chris Froggatt at the wheel of it. Top speeds, Ryuichi Tomita's Audi being the fastest around Monza in the straight line, 281. Chris Froggatt 280, that's brave. Chris Goodwin 279, Matteo Cairoli and Antonio Fuoco all at 279 kph as well. Great, these new graphics introduced last year, being able to show top speeds and also corner speeds as well. But the fastest man outright is Mirko Bortolotti, fastest then by 10th in Q1, and Mirko is in the pits with Gemma Scott.
Mirko, back in the car, and you really mean business.
Yeah, well, great start, definitely. I had a good lap, so I'm really happy. Thanks to the team for a great job throughout the weekend, and I managed to put the lap together, so good start. Now Marco's in the car, and then Andrea, and I'm sure they will do a good job as well.
I saw you chatting to Marco just before he got in the car. What were you saying to him?
Just everything that, all my experience from the session, everything I can give him, obviously, or to Andrea. It's really crucial in that part to give them all the info they need, so that they can get in the car and focus on what they have to do. But they're really experienced, so they know what to do.
Thank you, well done.
Thank you.
So Mirko Bortolotti's work for the moment is done, and now then the drivers get set, as I say, for the second part of the qualifying session. So Mirko Bortolotti ahead of Antonio Fuoco, then Raffaele Marciello, Dries van Thor 4th, Alex Fontana doing a good job 5th. That car having had an engine drama and a hardship lap offered to it this morning. 6th quickest, Sheldon van der Linden's BMW. Ben Barnicoat's McLaren 7th ahead of Alessandro Pierguidi in the Ferrari Ospitungos Mercedes. Mauro Engel, we rather overlooked, despite the fact that a bright pink car should draw attention to itself, only 10th fastest. The overall top time, of course, Bortolotti, overall as in terms of the overall class, in the Silver Cup, Alex Fontana, and then go down a little bit further for Pro-Am and Phil Keane, topping the times there with Hiroshi Hamaguchi. So the screen's now prepared, ready for Q2, which is about 3 minutes away. Of course, still the entry or the classification cycles through, and you see that DNS not seen in the session, the Team Allied Racing Porsche, which did cop a lot of damage yesterday, both front and rear. So perhaps not a huge surprise that that car is missing. Whether it could be made good for the race and start at the back, I rather doubt, because it's a tall order for a team that's already stretched running cars in the GT4 European Series. But a shame that, because it takes certainly the quick Nicolas Schurl off the grid. Right, so Mirko Bortolotti is the man with that top time based on Q1. Let's have a look at that flying lap, John. This is Mirko Bortolotti around Monza.
Well, he's got a challenge ahead of him, because he's got 3 cars that have come down main straight here at Monza into the braking zone, into the first chicane on the brakes. And again, what's he going to do? Where's he going to find a way around all this traffic and not compromise? He's got the Tempesta Ferrari directly ahead of him, so he's going to seek a lot of cooperation. And whether they're on a flying lap, whether, I'm not quite sure. But for Bortolotti, it'll be a frustration knowing getting 1 car is one thing, but having 3 cars, and particularly now coming into the end of Sector 1, into Sector 2, into this second chicane, very easy to overdrive, and actually not pushing particularly hard on the exit, not wanting to run too close to those cars directly ahead of him. And I mean, just feathering the throttle coming through Lesmo 1 and up into Lesmo 2 again, just really trying to make a judgment. The Ferrari ahead kicks up a bit of dust on the exit of Lesmo 2, then the run down from Lesmo 2, this dip down under the original, or the banked part of this Monza racetrack, then up into Ascari, the quick turn to the left, ride the curve, then to be careful to make the cut back to the right. Then really here is the important part of the chicane. Get the drive. You can run the curve on the outside, but be careful. At this time of morning, it could still be holding moisture, but for Mirko Bortolotti, he knows all about it, and he's backed out of it again, letting another car go through. That's good driving, because he's not himself going on a flying lap, but he saw a car that was pulled out of the way. Now, oh, Mirko, what's that all about? You let your tire temperatures get a little bit cool on that slower lap.
Well, he caught the moment and did enough at the end of that session then to get himself onto pole position. Mirko Bortolotti then getting back in the Lamborghini swing of things. Right, quick look back at the highlights of Q1. Teams getting ready. Green flag wave. Teams were still getting ready, in fact, in the pit lane. 163 Lamborghini from the Emil Frey Racing team hustling on. Giacomo Alfaway, one of the quick drivers in that car. Matt Campbell had gone fast, but also hooked a wheel into the dirt. And another driver in a big rush was Antonio Fuoco, who was topping the times at one point, with Mirko Bortolotti eventually going quicker than anybody. The number 63 Lamborghini then tops the times at the end of Q1, and the team, well drilled of course, bringing him in early, giving themselves a few more minutes in order to effect the driver change ready for this Q2, because the green flag is already waved and the cars making their way out onto the circuit. Not everybody in quite the same tearing rush this time. I think everybody now is trying to second guess when it might be best to go, and also let earlier drivers go out and help rubber in the circuit. But Callum Eilert will now take over number 71, with Davide Rigon therefore doing the final driving duties, and the Iron Lynx team brings out another new set of Pirelli tyres ready for this session.
It'll be interesting to see how Callum Eilert deals with this kind of qualifying, slightly different to the qualifying that he has been accustomed to, where you have a set time to go out, not literally, this is 15 minutes, but you've got effectively 1, maybe 2 flying laps when you can capitalise on the freshness of that fresh set of Pirelli tyres. And a fairly impressive time, a 1:47.114 from Antonio Fuoco to put that Iron Lynx Ferrari currently second quickest. Where that car will end up, the 71 Ferrari, at the end of Q2, well, Callum Eilert, it's in your hands.
So out he will go in a moment. Circuit now getting a little bit busier. 15 minutes by the time you've done an out lap and a start-up lap, and also try and dodge around the traffic. You've got to be on your toes. It's a short, sharp session, isn't it?
It's a very difficult qualifying structure that we have, because with the number of cars, okay, 42 cars, not 43 as we had hoped for. Nevertheless, Monza, a 5-kilometre plus circuit, there's not a lot of space, and if you catch a car at the wrong part of the circuit, for example coming into the second chicane, it is very difficult to do anything to find your way around a car, other than if that car has been cooperative and lets you go through more or less unimpeded. It's just the nature of motor racing, the competitive. I mean, 18 cars in Q1 were covered by less than a second. So an indication. Now normally it's more than 20 cars covered by less than a second. Nevertheless, 18 cars by less than a second. You know, how do you find a clear lap?
This is the question. This is the task that they all now face, as in 93, Stefan Göring attacked the Rettifilio chicane. So everybody venturing out onto the circuit, and we'll be able to see now where the order is going to be, not only in the session but outright. So 63 Lamborghini, Mirko Bortolotti did the time. He is currently top, and Antonio Fuoco, second fastest in Q1, gives the car over now to Callum Ilott. Right, 88 we are looking at, which is Danny Juncadella, who led but finished second in the Fanatec Esports Pro Series race yesterday. And the Mercedes then, now with all of that grunt, hauls itself out of the chicane. This car, which is fourth at the end of Q1, but straight away, John, there's traffic up the road.
Indeed, I mean, what can you do? And I think that might be the 32 Audi, which is no slouch. But we wait to see it coming down. Oh, Danny Juncadella has got the fastest sector time in Sector 1. He's really the first car to go through Sector 1 at race pace. The Audi pulls across and lets the Mercedes go through again. Good etiquette on the racetrack, because, you know, sometimes what goes around comes around, and the next time these two cars might be on track, it might be the other way around. So Danny Juncadella, in this initial flying lap, the first car to go on to a serious flying lap, showing the quickest first sector time. Down straight up into the Ascari chicane. He's got clear air ahead of him, so he will be able to complete this lap. And look, you can see already 4/10 up in Sector 2, but he's only really competing against people that are not, maybe, let's put it this way, in his race. So let's watch what can Juncadella do. Comes down, still feeling he needs to put some tire temperature into those Pirelli tires, just moving around to put a bit of lateral load, then into the braking zone, down a couple of gears, launches the car into Parabolica, lets the car then free up on the exit, run as wide as possible, but not over those white, green and red demarcation lines. That will be a time deletion. So he goes quickest in this session.
And quickest on aggregate as well. So provisional pole position to Danny Juncadella. That time 1:48.701, and the average is a 47.962, as up to the top of the times now, in fact, in Q2 has gone Stuart White in the Bentley. This is Christopher Mies, who we didn't see very much of yesterday. Didn't seem to spend much time behind the wheel of the Attempto Audi, but looking quick as he comes up towards the line. Rick Brokers has now gone fastest in Q2. Christopher Mies goes third in Q2, and that puts the car up to third overall. Now look at this from Callum Ilott, John. This is looking good.
Very good middle sector, Callum Ilott. 3/10 and a bit up, so this looks like we might see the Ferrari. Well, not might see, it has gone. So Callum Ilott in his first qualifying here in a GT3 car, delivering as everybody would have anticipated and expected.
Now 54 Porsche is another one on a mission. Up towards the end of the lap comes Klaus Bachler, who made his name initially in one make Porsche categories, the Porsche Super Cup, for example. Callum Ilott the fastest then, and what about the Porsche? Fifth only. Started well, but Klaus Bachler then fifth quickest on the aggregate. The lap actually 8th in Q2, but 5th, which is where he would provisionally start from on the grid. So good, but not good enough.
And slight mistake going into the first chicane, just slightly overran under brakes, ran wide, then had to compromise in the switch back to the left to make the exit out of the chicane. So that is already a compromise set in for the 54 Dynamic Motorsport Porsche as it makes its way down into the end of Sector 1 and into the second chicane, and traffic ahead of him as we look at the 63. Marco Mappelli comes across the line amongst 3 other cars.
So we're virtually at the halfway point already as the clock ticks on down. Callum Ilott's lap time then putting Ferrari 71 at the top of the times. there you've got Marco Mappelli. Now, where is Marco to be found within the session, and therefore on the aggregated? At the moment, he's way down, because this is really the first flying lap. Again, the Orange 1 FFF racing team going out a little bit late, but therefore now being able to push. Trouble is, Mappelli has found himself in traffic. He's got the Bentley up the road ahead. Stuart White at the wheel of it, the South African driver. So Marco Mappelli needs to be brave, needs to be bold on this lap, John.
He does, and one of the issues he's got, the Bentley has been very quick all weekend, certainly in the hands of Pacinici. But also the Bentley's also been very quick in a straight line. So that's a problem. So the Lamborghini, I'm just trying to see where the Lamborghinis were. 63 Lamborghini in terms of straight line speed was way down. It was only doing 276 kilometers per hour yesterday, whereas the Bentley was up around the 280, 279 kilometers per hour. So even at so many 3 or 4 miles an hour, it'll be a frustration. You can catch, but can you overtake? Difficult for Mappelli, and the run down into Parabolica. You got the number 4 Mercedes just ahead. So these 3 cars all beginning to get very close to one another, which is not ideal. For the Mercedes, not a problem, but for the Bentley and the Lamborghini, it will have a bearing on this lap time.
So Mappelli through the traffic. Most people, of course, complaining about traffic in some respects at the moment, either having to get out of the way of a quicker car or being impeded. But as Mappelli comes across the line, that's second fastest then on the grid. So Marco Mappelli goes second, the lap time third in this isolated part, but second on the grid, which is arguably the more important. Nicholas Nielsen, who was another driver that went really well yesterday in esports terms, takes over 51 Ferrari, and he comes now down to the Parabolica. So this is the car that he has taken over from Alessandro Pierguidi. Rick Brokers has gone up to second in this session and is currently 7th on the grid. Nicholas Nielsen will break the beam to go 6th fastest on aggregate then.
So really, I mean, you can see there's groups of cars, some of which are very quick groups of cars, in which case, in the case of Alessandro Pierguidi, it's not hindered them too much. It's when you maybe come up to a group of some of the silver cars, maybe one of the Pro-Am cars with the Am behind the wheel, that their pace isn't quite at the level that you're capable of running. That's where the time will vanish.
So right now, the Iron Lynx Ferraris switch track position, because from that lap, backing out of it was Nicholas Nielsen. Right, somebody being slightly delayed there in traffic is the 57 Michael Grenier Mercedes. What about 163? This is Norbert Siedler in the ML Fry Racing car, and Norbert Siedler is again finding that there's traffic where he doesn't want it. Trouble is, he's going to have that for 3 hours of a race.
Yeah, I mean, he's going to make a look up the inside into Ascari, but it's going to be a commitment to do it, and he decides against it. He wasn't quite certain whether Mercedes was going to place itself. It could have been a risk that he didn't want to take. He's still got over 4 minutes of the session remaining, so he might choose to back out of it, albeit the Porsche directly behind is going to come into play. So it's a decision. He has backed out of it to give himself that little bit of space, but allowing the Porsche to draw close to the rear of the Lamborghini. Whatever you do, can you ever be right?
Well, that's the problem, isn't it? And there's always somebody that's going to say you should have done ... We've got just under 4 minutes of the session to go. Norbert Siedler comes up towards the line, 11th, that puts him. 87 Mercedes in the meantime is another one pressing on. Konstantin Terashenko at the wheel, heading to the timing line now, and Terashenko's AKA ASP car goes 10th. That's a good effort. Simon Gachet did the first part of qualifying, moving from Audi to Mercedes for this year. And Danny Juncadella is pressing on still, but the 88 Mercedes, 4th. I was about to say only 4th. I think 4th is okay in this company, isn't it?
It is, but you've got the lead WRT Audi ahead of you, the orange 1 FFF Lamborghini in second place, and of course the new team this year, Iron Lynx, consolidating what we've seen all weekend, that they are a power force to be reckoned with.
So Danny Juncadella, who's being warned about track limits, incidentally, comes now up through the right-hand of the Parabolica. Let's see where this is going to put him then as he heads towards the line now. And quick sector 1, not so good sector 2, lost 4/10ths, and so the lap ultimately is not an improvement.
No, and it didn't look like there was a big commitment on that lap from Danny Juncadé as we go back to Klaus Bachler in the 54 Porsche. So again, running behind the Lamborghini. Is that which Lamborghini is that? That's the 163 he's running directly behind. So Earl Bamber behind the wheel, and that's the 163 Lamborghini. So the two cars, the 163 and the 54, have been seesawing around looking for space, trying not to lose ground and allow a car behind to catch. Bamber comes across the line, and that car goes 8th quickest, so he's going to be not dissatisfied with that.
Indeed, and as long as you are able to avoid trouble at that first chicane and get on with the race, then you can come up with a plan, can't you? Right, let's ride on board with 32. This is Kelvin van der Linde, way out wide over the curve, but he's got that Audi by the scruff of its neck, hasn't he?
And he's got good pace off. Lesmo too. Look at the way, well, I think that was an assisted pass, but now he's got a feature, look, 2 cars ahead, juking around coming into the chicane, and he's going to lose the momentum he's built up coming through the second part of Mascari. Then the final part, run the car over the curve. Kelvin van der Linde absolutely dragging the Audi to try and drag a performance. Currently that car 3rd quickest overall behind the Lamborghini and the Ferrari that are provisionally holding sway in the front row of the grid into Parabolica. 3rd gear, pulls 4th, 5th gear, and he's coming into the pit lane. He's abandoned. He's got, well, that's the session finished, so they're going to be at best on the provisional 2nd row of the grid. Still just under a minute to go for people to complete their laps. Lukas Stolz is one of those cars in the number 4 Mercedes. Stolz presently, well, the number 4 Mercedes presently in 4th position, and stays in 7th position and doesn't improve.
That car's not doing quite what you might have anticipated, is it? It's there or thereabouts, to use a cliche, but it's not been an outright stellar pace that it is offering up. There is the man that runs the Attempto team, Arkin Arka, coming up towards the completion of the lap in the number 99 Audi. He's running cars in GT3 and in Lamborghini Super Trofeo, and driving them as well, so it's a busy weekend for the German-based Turkish driver. Comes over the line, and as he heads down towards the Rettifilio, there with a bit of smoke coming from it is the Mad Panda Mercedes. Don't think anyone's overly concerned, but it might be.
I was going to say, maybe that's more like steam.
Yeah. A report from the pits apparently is that it could be a water pump issue, which would tally with what you're saying about steam, John.
Yeah.
It's a very hot Panda, that. So yes, the drip tray.
Well, there's the drip tray going under, so there's clearly a problem with the front end around the radiator. Maybe just a hose is leaking, or if it is something more serious like a water pump, well, that's going to take a lot of time. It'll probably not be something that could be repaired if it is a water pump in the time between the end of Q2 and the beginning of Q3.
So a leaking Panda needs to be attended to. This is Marco Mappelli, who's still pressing on, but it's all a bit superfluous, this, because he's lost 6/10 over the lap, and I would imagine he won't take the flag, will he? He'll come into the pit lane. Lukas Stolz ahead. So Callum Eilert then goes fastest in that session, and number 71 Ferrari is the quickest car. Rick Brokers, despite the fact that it was a bit steamy at the end, 2nd in the session, and on the aggregate 11th. 3rd, Kelvin van der Linde in the session, and 3rd on aggregate. And I'll tell you a lot about Marco Mappelli. He does take the flag on the track and finds 6/10 of a second right at the very end in that last sector. So 5th in Q2 and 2nd on aggregate, the number 63 Lamborghini.
And I suspect that the team will be very happy indeed that they've consolidated their provisional front row of the grid. Now it'll be Andrea Candarelli will take over the driving duties in that Lamborghini, and the challenge will be there to the Iron Lynx Ferrari, which will be a load of fun for me to see what Davide Rigo can do against fellow Italian Caldarelli.
I mean, qualifying in itself is an event, never mind the races that you have in the Fanatec GT World Challenge Europe, powered by AWS Endurance Cup. And it all started here back in 2011, the Endurance Series, a Porsche victory. It's going to be a Porsche anniversary. Well, it could be a Ferrari win, of course. Callum Eilert's done a ripper job this morning. He's fastest in Q2, and he's talking to Gemma.
Callum, we heard John Watson during that session say, well, it's no surprise that Callum's gone fastest. And you've just said to me, oh, it wasn't bad.
It wasn't bad. I know. I mean, weekend started off a bit slow. I forgot my toothpaste, and now we're P1, so it's not too bad. No, the car was good. Obviously, Antonio was P2 in the first session, so we already knew we'd be in a good position. And yeah, quali. I missed the quali, so I enjoyed that one.
Fantastic. Well done. Good
Cheers.
job.
Thank you.
It's good to have Callum Ilott in GT World Challenge Europe this year. Very, very good driver. Initially, part of the Red Bull programme when he came into Formula 3. And I think only lasted a season, and therefore had great delight in being on the podium at the Red Bull Ring the year after, receiving his trophy from Helmut Marko when he was driving then for Van Amersfoort as, if you like, a privateer. So Callum Ilott the fastest in Q2 from Marco Mappelli. This is how we look on aggregate now. Callum Ilott, Marco Mappelli, Calvin van der Linde's efforts dictating the top 3. Danny Juncadella fourth ahead of Marco Wittmann, Norbert Siedler to round out the top 6. Keep on scrolling down, you can see how jumbled an order it is becoming. And we've got one more 15-minute session to go. Ollie Wilkinson's 17th now, or the McLaren that he has just driven is 17th. Martin Tomczyk's BMW 18th. And Tim Zimmerman, 23rd. I mentioned him because he had a spin yesterday morning in the free practice session. Stuart White's efforts early doors have got the Bentley to 30th. Nelson Panciatici, I would imagine, will make that fly in a few minutes' time when he goes out on track. And Benjamin Hitters and Patrick Kuyler. Patrick Kuyler should be the star in number 33 Ferrari. Not seen him in a Ferrari before, so he's driven Lamborghinis and most recently Mercedes in British GT, now Ferrari for the Finnish driver. And Sam DeHaan's efforts have got, with Rob Collard, 35th for the Ram Racing Mercedes. That was the team for whom Patrick Kuyler drove in British GT last year. Quick look at the highlights of Q2. With the cars storming out onto the circuit. Initially, only a handful, but then there was a mad flurry, and one of those drivers really charging along around the outside Earl Bamber into the Parabolica in that GPX Racing Porsche. Danny Juncadella was one being warned about track limits. Marco Mappelli pressed on, second fastest he was, come the end of the session, and Danny Juncadella for the ACA ASP team now has that car over to Jules Gounon. Really strong driver lineup again for ACA in 88. A rather smoky mad Panda Motorsport Mercedes. Rick Brokers, having been second fastest in the session, steamed his way into the pit lane. Callum Ilott, though, fastest, and it is this number 71 Ferrari that tops the aggregate times going into Q3. It's been good so far, John. Now the fastest driver, in theory, gets into the car. The car's at their lightest, of course, as fuel has been burnt off, and this session is going to be good, and it'll get underway in about 3 minutes' time.
I don't know who's the fastest driver in any of these, certainly in the pro teams, because one would have said that Callum Ilott, arguably, some would say Antonio Fiuco would be the quickest cars in the 71. I don't know anybody would have thought that Davide Rigo would be quicker than those two. And likewise in the orange one, FF Racing Lamborghini, Mirko Bortolotti, sorry, that sort of repeats itself a bit, doesn't it? And Mirko Bortolotti, Marco Mappelli, is Andrea Caldarelli quicker than both of them, or maybe just one of them, or none of them? So it's very interesting. Teams have offered up slightly different driver lineups for Q1, Q2 and Q3 than maybe those we would have considered. If we were drawing up our driver roster, would we have done it in the way that the Iron Lynx have done or the Lamborghini team have done? I don't know.
I totally agree. I mean, I was thinking early on, interesting that WRT put Dries Vanthoor in first and are keeping Charles Weerts for the final part. Nothing against Charles Weerts, but he's not as experienced as Dries, and you would have thought he would be the quickest. The fastest corner speed through Ascari, Christopher Meeks, 174 kilometres an hour, 173 from Norbert Siedler. That's only one isolated part of the circuit, I'll grant you, but it's interesting to get that data and to have a look at how different drivers are good at different corners. Now, what about the Parabolica, where you need big whatnots to be a really brave chap through there? And it's Christopher Meeks again, 150, with Calvin van der Linde on 150 kilometres an hour as well, with then the Danny Juncadella Mercedes 149 kilometres an hour through the Parabolica on our Race Vision powered by AWS graphic. Interesting stuff, that.
Yes, I think those speeds represent, I suspect, the apex speed of the corner. Parabolica is a corner which is essentially a slow-in, fast-out corner, somewhat different to maybe other corners around the Monza racetrack, but nevertheless, it's still a pretty quick apex speed. But by the time you get on to the main straight here at Monza, you're probably just about getting into fifth, if not sixth gear, and you'll be doing something near 230, 40 kilometers per hour. Very long corner, but the crucial part is it's on the apex where that speed is recorded.
So there you've got the Rofco Audi good to go. That's one of the Silver Cup entries, though Benji Goethe, Stuart Hall, James Pull, the 3 drivers for that car this year. And Stuart Hall, the most experienced of the 3, looks after the Rofco collection that Royal Goethe has, and Royal's 2 sons now go racing. Benji we've seen in GT. He was rather thrown in at the deep end here a couple of years ago, but has learned, progressed, and has developed quite nicely. And Stuart himself, 4th at Le Mans a few years ago with Martin Short. There you've got the number 20 Mercedes set to go. That's one of the 2 driver entries, Valentin Pierberg and the very quick Dominic Baumann. So the klaxon sounds in the background. The pit lane is now open, and Q3, 15 minutes, and the clock ticks on down. There's another of the Silver Cup entries, Richie Tomita, Frank Bird and Valdemar Eriksson, Danish single-seater driver who we've seen on occasions in India in the MRF Challenge, and he is good to go. Frank Bird's dad, Paul Bird.
Nothing like a good, yeah, I'm going to say nothing like a good British chicken. Frank Bird poultry.
Well, that's the family business. Paul Bird, Frank's father, is, when he's not running Frank Bird Poultry, a superbike team owner in his representation in the British Championship and in the past in the World Superbike Championship, and also a club-level rally driver. But Frank Jr. has gone into circuit racing, came out of single-seaters into GT cars. Set of boots going on to Valentin Asclo. Now that car gets a 3-place grid drop, incidentally, for an infringement under a yellow flag yesterday. So a 3-place grid drop for number 159. Garage 59 Aston ready to go.
Yes, one might say, is that a penalty or is that a bonus? Because where you are towards the middle or back of the grid is always a nightmare into turn 1. So actually you might find yourself outside of an area that could be a problematic area, particularly under the brakes, when the back of the field is still on full throttle, the front of the field is braking heavily. So, okay, 3 grid pace drop is not something you would choose, but it's not necessarily the end of the world if you are on that end of the grid.
True. Equally, however, because the championship is so competitive, that if you thought, well, I know, I'll save a lap of fuel and I'll start from the pit lane rather than get involved in all the dramas at the first chicane, because it's wall-to-wall traffic these days, and because they're so evenly matched, overtaking becomes really difficult, it's less of a good idea. So you kind of have to go with your grid position. The days of bailing and starting from the pit lane and picking your way through, they're gone, because it's just too competitive out there now.
Well, certainly the first session and the first hour, look, here's the issue. Cars now beginning a flying lap, and the field is just pouring out of the pit lane. Now, those cars coming out of the pit lane have to stay by regulation on the right-hand side of the racetrack down into the first chicane. Those cars on a flying lap, some of them want to get into that lane because that's the slightly smoother approach into the first chicane. So just it's a traffic jam.
Thomas Drouet is about to go in 87. There is 114. The Emil Frey Lamborghini that Jack Aitken is going to drive. Now this will be interesting. We've been focusing a bit on Callum Islet, but let's not ignore Jack Aitken, of course, after his Formula 1 debut at the back end of last year, John.
Not at all, and Jack Aitken, delighted to see him here in Monza. Again, it's a slight change of direction in terms of what he's accustomed to, but clearly loads of ability and a big future ahead of him, wherever it happens to be, whether it stays in GT3 or whether he decides to move on into other areas, but delighted to have him here at Monza.
Confirmation, incidentally, that the 222 Porsche is withdrawn because of the damage of yesterday. Mathieu Jaminet then is now at the wheel of the GPX Porsche, goes through, and this is again going to be a car well worth watching over the course of this session. Riding with him now, John. Oops, gets all squirrely under braking.
Rear brake took a bit of a grab, maybe on the downshift. I don't know what it was, but suddenly the rear of the car was all over the shop. To me, that would be tyre temperature more anything else, but that would have certainly woken up Mathieu Jaminet if he needed to be woken up at all.
So that was the alarm call, wasn't it, with 10 minutes to go. This is how it looked from the outside, John. Talk us through this.
Well, it go out, and you see he comes across right to left, and that combination of doing downshift, braking, and all of a sudden the back of the car. I mean, we've noticed, in fact, over the 2 days of running, that in certain context conditions, it's the rear tyre has been the tyre that's been more difficult to get to temperature. Matthew Jaminet had a moment which could have easily ended up in the barrier. Luckily, he got control and kept the car pointing in the right direction.
So Patrick Kujala, interestingly, for Ferrari, is the fastest, 1 minute 54.193 within this session. And right now, Matthew Jaminet is fighting the Porsche. Good middle sector, though, relative to everybody else, but it is early doors yet. We've got relatively few times against which to compare, it must be said.
So, what's he going to do? Traffic directly ahead, coming down into Parabolica. He's not gaining any ground, but he wants to make sure that he gets in cleanly, and now hard on the throttle to drive. That is one of the two FFF Racing Lamborghinis. So Jaminet, again, you can see, even though he's quicker off the corner, he's not really making any great inroads into the pace of the Lamborghini now, only in the last third of the straight, which he got a chance to get down the inside.
Now this is Jules Gounon, former 88C GT Masters champion, and after a couple of seasons with Bentley, of course that programme at an end, he's had to find gainful employment elsewhere, and ACA ASP and Mercedes happy to have him, and he goes 14th with that lap in the Mercedes that he's taken over from Gianni Jonquidea. Raffaele Marciello went first. Now what about Davide Rigon? Absolute best sector 1, personal best sector 2. Jules Gounon has set the target time for this session for Q3 of 46.8, but Rigon is on a mission.
A lot to defend, because this car has been so strong all over the weekend. Breaks the line now, consolidates. We lost time in the second and the third sector, but nevertheless still good enough to keep that car ahead of the pack.
Now what about Charles Weerts then, because he has been given the duties for Q3, so the pressure is on, but Charles has really developed over the last couple of seasons. Took that Sprint Cup title last year with Dries van Thor, runs it wide out of the Parabolica, fires the gun onto the pit straight, as it were, aims for the line and goes through now, and that puts the car at third on aggregate, and within the session only 7th fastest actually in Q3, but on aggregate puts it third.
Yes, and they will be relatively pleased to keep that car at the, just slightly overrunning into the first chicane again, to keep the WRT Audi where it is. Jules Gounon doing what he does ever so well, and that's dragging a performance out. Was at one point of Bentley, now it's going to be in the Mercedes, the 88 Mercedes, down into Parabolica, running behind the sister or a Silver Cup car. No Twitch coming in to the entry, had to make a correction, so that will have shaved a 10th or 2 off the potential. Could it be 3 purples for Gounon coming across the start-finish line?
So 3 purples it is, and a 1:46.442, really good effort, and that puts the car quickest in Q3, pole in the aggregated times. What about the young Brit David Pittard, based in Cologne these days, and he goes across the line to be 5th. Good effort that in the Valkenhorst BMW. David's another of those drivers that doesn't really get the credit he deserves, flies under the radar, to use another cliche, but he's a very, very quick driver indeed, and he's really part of that Valkenhorst family now.
Andrea Caldarelli, and just maybe a little bit late in the brakes, he made a late cut coming down the straight. He's trying to avoid those initial bumps on the early part of the braking zone into the first chicane, consequently made a slight error. Again, wait and see what comes up. We're coming up to the end of sector 1 in the second. It should be green, it might be purple, it is green.
So Caldarelli with a personal best fights the car out of the second chicane. He's not doing too badly for traffic here. There is a car up the road, yes, but it's not a whole wall of slower cars. So Andrea Caldarelli, if he times this run right, might be okay. Limited overtaking required. A lot of effort being put into the actual steering wheel, isn't there?
Yes, I don't think the balance of the car is as good as we've seen from previous occasions. So Andrea's pushing very hard. He pushed very hard into the first chicane, and he was struggling with the car coming off the second chicane. Look at that, wow! I mean, look at the amount of hand movement that he's having to input into the steering of the Lamborghini. So whether it's tire related, whether it's tire temperature related, or whether did he get a new set of rubber, or was he the one that had to go on the best of the rest? He's got personal bests, but again, the amount of, look at the speed of hand movement to make those minute corrections, having to really on throttle and, but principally on steering, adjust all the time.
Across the timing line, goes fastest then, so that means that Andrea Caldarelli on aggregate is at the top of the times. The average is a 47.006, and the lap time that he's just done, putting him second. So Gunon is the fastest in Q3, but on the average, the aggregated times, it is number 63 Lamborghini, and there's still 5 minutes on the clock, although Charles Wirtz has had a very slow middle sector, effectively bailing out of that lap, and he's going to go again. Rob Bell is behind him looking at the McLaren, and Charles Wirtz doing a lot of very vigorous weaving there.
Yeah, it is, again, A, looking for track position, B, trying to maintain as much tire temperature in the process, because he's come out of the throttle. So now into Parabolica, he needs to have continuity and temperature in those tires. So he's got the McLaren to keep him honest, as the rest of the field in the closing third of this session. So Ricardo Feller, very good run indeed in the Lamborghini, that second sector fastest overall, puts it up into 7th position for Emile Frey. He'll be delighted with that.
Absolutely so. Again, that car quivers under braking as he comes up onto the back of the 31 Audi, which is Valdemar Eriksson, GT debutant, at the wheel of it currently for the WRT Silver Cup entry. So 4 more minutes of this session, and number 63 Lamborghini, thanks to Andrea Caldarelli's gun lap in this session, taking provisional pole position. Of course, then you factor in any penalties that have come hitherto this weekend, and indeed may come from this session. Christopher Haase looking at lost time in the middle sector, but the Santalog Audi comes through, and this is a car that he shares with Adrien Tambay and also Alexandre Cugno, but Christopher Haase, the most experienced in terms of Audi GT3 terms amongst that driver combination.
Yeah, I mean, what can you say? He's backed out of it again, just looking for that clear opportunity now. Takes a very unusual entry into Parabolica. The purpose of doing that is to get a better exit. So he was extremely slow in and very wide in, then made a more diagonal cut across to the final part of the corner to get maximum acceleration. So interesting to see what Christopher Haase's lap time does end up on this. Well, it will not be his final lap. We've got 3 minutes remaining.
Nelson Pancitici has been quick all weekend in the Bentley, but when it matters, it's not really coming for him. I don't think we've seen a proper effort out of that car yet. It's not in the top 20. It's down to 24th, in fact, Nelson Pancitici, and half a second lost in the middle sector. I'm intrigued to know why people are losing a fair chunk of time in the middle sector, because it's becoming almost consistent now, but that lap was no better for the French driver.
It's been the same across 3 sessions. Towards the end of each session, it's sector 2, which is the bit from the entry into the second chicane through the 2 Lesmos and the run up to Ascari. That is where everybody has lost time. They can do a good run in sector 1, they can do a reasonably good one in sector 3, but that maybe the more technical, certainly the 2 right-hand corners at Lesmo, the second of which is the one where it's easy to overrun on the exit, is the reason why. And I put that down to just the best use of your tire came on your first 2 flying laps, and you're coming to the end of a 15-minute session, just that part of the racetrack not delivering up the time in the way it would do when your tire was at its freshest.
David Rigon's feet hard at work here, John, coming out of the Parabolica.
And he looks like he might be a left foot breaker, because his left foot is hovering. Yes, he is.
He's just gone third.
The right, so hard on the throttle with his right foot, watching the brake when he comes up. There we go. And in fact, the shot of the car on track is a little bit ahead of what we're watching David Rigon's feet. So I thought maybe Rigo may have been a right foot breaker, but no, he's gone with the modern trend and brakes with his left foot.
So that car, number 71 Ferrari, third on aggregate now, as Eddie Cheever the third comes down towards the Parabolica in the Sky Tempesta Racing Ferrari, number 93. It's operated effectively out of the AF Corsa stable, but this car in Pro-Am up towards the timing line now. And what is that lap going to be? It will be for 37th on aggregate. and Ychiva losing out in sectors 2 and 3 there. So we're almost at the end of the session. More drivers are being warned about respecting track limits, one of whom is Vincent Abril, number 4 Mercedes. And that's 9th on the aggregate, incidentally, Vincent Abril. And the other is number 71, which is a track limit warning for the Iron-linked Davide Rigon driven Ferrari. Christopher Haase, on aggregate, quite a long way down, really, but pressing on in the first sector. Again, 6/10 lost, big chunk of time lost in the middle. Flag's imminent, so I don't think we're going to have... Go on, John.
I was just going to say, Alberto Costa trying to get out of the way, and almost the two cars tripping over one another. So Haase's time has been compromised in that middle sector. And now the final run down, and I suspect he's going to bail out because he's backed off. Checkered flag is out, so nothing more to be gained. The time has been lost, if there was anything to be gained at all. So frustration for everybody. That's the nature of a large field. Even on a large racetrack, it's so difficult to get that one clear lap at the point when your tyre is at its freshest. You might have to wait 3 or 4 laps and then take your chances. There's no guarantee that when you go out, you'll get that opportunity on that fresh set of rubber.
The last lap from Davide Rigon has been cancelled for track limit abuse. So Davide Rigon, a lap time disallowed for track limit abuse. So that's the car that's second on the grid, thanks to Raffaele Marciello, Danny Juncadella and Jules Gounon. But 63 takes provisional pole position. Andrea Caldarelli, Marco Mappelli and Mirko Bortolotti. Andrea Caldarelli then dragging that up from where it was at the end of Q2. So the drivers now, in some cases, are going to be required for taking their cars to scrutineering. And we'll try and hear if we can from our top drivers in a moment.
That was a good effort by Andrea Caldarelli, because it looked to me to be a lot of hard work. But in spite of that, he did get the time that was enough to consolidate their team with the pole position. And they'll be delighted, just that intermark battle between Lamborghini, who are not a million miles down the road, and Ferrari, who are probably just a few less than a million miles down the road.
The top 24 cars are all covered by less than a second, and that's on aggregate. That's not one session, that's across the 3. Top 24 covered by 0.994 of a second. That's insane, isn't it? Mirko Bortoletti, Marco Mappelli and Andrea Caldarelli fastest then at the end of qualifying, ahead of Raffaele Marciello, Danny Juncadella and Jules Gounon. Antonio Fuoco, Callum Ilott, Davide Rigon third. We've had a lot to talk about in qualifying, and inevitably every time you see a car, not only is it the lap time that's of interest, it's the driver, because it is this remarkable entry, and there are some star people in this that almost get overlooked because it is such a good entry. But now we look forward to the race, because there's so much that is going to happen. We know first of all that there's that pinch point at the first chicane, and we know as well that around here it's a circuit that always delivers plenty of drama, and with new teams, new driver combinations, it's always fascinating to start a season. Monza, the perfect place for it. So the race itself, which is due to get underway at 3 o'clock local time, promises to be a really good one indeed. Right, so pole, Bortolotti, Mappelli, Caldarelli. Andrea, first up, is with Gemma.
Boys, that is a fantastic session. Andrea, there, the difference is 7/1000th of a second. That's insane.
Yeah, it's very close. We knew that it was a very tough field, but we didn't think it was so close. Mirko did an amazing job in Q1. Marco got a bit unlucky with traffic in Q2, and even more unlucky because we had the puncture during my lap. So I was very lucky to finish the lap, and so yeah, the luck was on our side. But thanks to all the team, because they did an amazing job for the car all weekend.
Certainly traffic was difficult, wasn't it, Marco?
Yeah, it's the same for everybody, so let's not complain too much and think about the race.
Absolutely. Who will be starting?
Don't know yet. We didn't decide yet.
Go and roll the dice.
Yeah.
Excellent stuff. I'll have a fantastic race. We'll see you on the grid. Thanks, boys.
Thank you.
24 cars covered by 0.994 of a second. Who says BOP is a bad thing? It clearly works. That's just extraordinary. Right, John, what do we read into all of that then? Okay, I know you've always talked very highly of the FFF racing team and the effort they made to develop that Lamborghini. Last year wasn't a stellar season, but the team has come back really strongly now.
Absolutely, but there we go with the highlights, so let's look again.
We'll come back to the thoughts about qualifying in a second, but yes, the highlights then of a lively qualifying session. This was Mathieu Jaminet at the end of the pit straight, getting all squirrely under braking, and 88 Danny Juncadella, of course, to take second with this is the car that ends up topping the times. Number 63, Mecca Bortolotti, Marco Mappelli and Andrea Caldarelli. Right, the race to start at 3 o'clock local time. It is going to be a fascinating one, as you saw 32 Charles Wirt going off into the gravel bed. Join us for that later on, and the opening round of the Endurance Cup. For now, from John Watson and David Addison, it's goodbye from Monza.